liebe Zuseher. Ich weiß nicht, ob ihr schon da seid, aber da man sich nie sicher sein kann, wann das Live-Video beginnt, schmökere ich immer ein bisschen im Buch. Herzlich willkommen beim Livestream der Plattform Christdemokratie. Mein Name ist Ledóchowski, ich bin Präsident der Plattform Christdemokratie. Die Plattform Christdemokratie setzt sich für christliche Werte ein, in Österreich, ganz Europa, auf der ganzen Welt, weil christliche Werte sind für alle Menschen gut. Was wir auch sein wollen, ist, dass wir zu Themen die Stimme erheben, wo vielleicht andere still sind, wo wir auch den Anspruch haben, für die schweigende Mehrheit zu sprechen. Und vor allem der Themenkomplex LGBT gehört zu diesem Themenbereich. Es ist nämlich, und das weiß jeder wahrscheinlich aus eigener Erfahrung, gefährliches Terrain. Sehr schnell wird der Vorwurf der Homophobie erhoben und normale Menschen haben keinen Spaß am Konflikt, an der Auseinandersetzung, also halten sie sich zurück. Als nun Polen in den Medien war, weil die EU Städtepartnerschaft nicht fördert, da polnische Städte und Gemeinden angeblich homophob sind, bin ich dem etwas nachgegangen. Da auch der ORF berichtet hat, 1/3 aller polnischer Gemeinden seien homophob, haben schwulen- und lesbenfreie Zonen ausgerufen. Das konnte ich nicht glauben, das wäre wirklich skandalös gewesen und es entsprach tatsächlich nicht der Wahrheit. Es ging da um etwas ganz, ganz anderes. Und darum freue ich mich ganz besonders, heute Timotheusz Zych, Vizepräsident von Ordo Iuris aus Warschau, zum Gespräch zu haben. Timotheusz, herzlich willkommen. Welcome, Timotheusz.
Welcome. Good to see you.
So, thank you very much that you have joined our discussion. We will continue talking in English now, but I invite everybody, ich lade alle ein, Fragen zu stellen. Ein Facebook-Kommentar, please write your questions in Facebook, in English, Polish or German. I will try to answer them. I have my phone here and I will try to have an eye on the questions. Timotheusz, you are Vice President of Ordo Iuris. Maybe tell us something about your organization and then explain to us what happened in Brussels and in Poland.
Ordo Iuris Institute for Legal Culture is a human rights think tank which is based in Warsaw, the capital of Poland. We stand for fundamental values such as family, marriage, legal protection of human life and all its stages, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, basically the very basic, the very fundamental concepts, the very fundamental precepts of the Western civilization. Our organization is active not only in Poland. We are a group of lawyers, so there's a litigation team providing free legal aid. No charge, no financial charge for this, for people who cannot afford it, in particular in presidential human rights cases. But we also represent our beneficiaries, our clients before a European Court of Human Rights. We are one of just 7 Polish organizations with formal ECOSOC status. That means we have official consultative status with the United Nations. And we submit legal analysis, legal comments, reports to different kinds of international organizations, not only United Nations, but also European Union and the Council of Europe. So it's basically the short description of our scope of activities.
So good for Poland to have you. We have in Austria, as you probably know, ADF, the headquarters for Europe. So I guess you are partners and working together with ADF on many cases.
We are happy to collaborate with ADF International and to a certain extent our range of activities is based on ADF model. ADF is also providing free legal aid to individual people and doing advocacy for values.
So as I've explained in German to our audience today, in the past days, also in our public television, we've heard the news that Poland has introduced LGBT-free zones. 1/3 of all towns and municipalities are homophobic. And that's why the European Union has stopped financing city partnerships with Polish cities, because this contradicts European law. So this is, of course, if true, scandalous. So maybe you could bring some light into that matter.
Of course, if it was true, probably our organization will advocate against this kind of ridiculous idea. But in reality, we are just dealing with fake news, with some kind of neo-Marxist mythology, nothing more. Political mythology with a story that has been just invented in order to mobilize political opposition against Poland. Of course, like in many untrue stories, also in this particular case, there is a seed of reality, a seed of true, but it's just a very little seed, since in reality, Polish municipalities have indeed adopted motions, adopted charters, but those charters, in fact, do not mention, in most cases, LGBT acronym or sexual orientation at all. These are the charters that actually stand for family and repeat provisions of Polish constitution. But to begin with the reaction and with the let's say short comment to what has been broadcast in many European countries. Last week, I think it happened last Wednesday, European Commissioner for Gender Equality, Mrs. Helena Dalli, tweeted that 6 applications of Polish municipalities, of Polish local governments for EU grants have been rejected by European Commission due to alleged homophobia, due to alleged homophobic legislation, homophobic acts that have been adopted by those municipalities. And therefore, based on the alleged discrimination, this funding has been denied to those municipalities. We never learned which municipalities were subject of this tweet. This information has been never released publicly, but Helena Dalli in general stated that she refers to so-called LGBT-free zones and family charters. In the first case, there are no LGBT-free zones at all in our country. It's just a product of mythology that as I stated. In second case, yes, right, there are family rights charters, but in fact, they just affirm something positive. They just refer to family rights, right? Large families, to the value of a stable marriage, and That's all. That's part of our legal system, and it's not something specific for a Polish legal system to affirm values like that. It's something quite normal, quite usual in most constitutions of European countries. That's not something exceptional at all. And just to add one more thing, Mrs. Daly actually didn't quote any kind of legal ground for this decision. As we all know, European Union was never granted competences in field of family law, not to say in terms of definition of marriage. This field of law, this area remains sole competence of the member states, and it's quite obvious that if European Union central institutions make any statements in this regard, those statements should always respect competences which remain with the member states. So according to the principle of legality, which is the very basic principle of all European legal system, which is the very basic principle of the democratic state ruled by the law, all officials taking decisions should give legal basis for decisions they issue. In this case, it lacks. We don't know about the legal basis for this statement. We don't know about any legal reasoning behind this tweet. Therefore, that's why Ordo Iuris Institute for Legal Culture has filed official request to Commissioner Daly, asking for more precise explanation of her decision. We asked her what municipalities she actually refers to, which part of the charters she finds controversial, and what is the legal ground for her decision to deny EU funding to those entities.
So, I mean, I think we all agree homosexual people should have every right and liberty to live their life as they choose. So obviously nobody who's sane supports, true discrimination against them. But why do you think then has the commissioner criticized the towns who have introduced this charter for family rights? What disturbed them? Why is the LGBT lobby or ideology against those family charters?
Yes, I think the statement that you made, your point is unquestionable, and I think nobody in Poland, no serious person in Poland questions this very basic and obvious statement that all citizens of our country should enjoy equal rights, and it would be also the case for homosexual people, like all others. I don't know if it's very well known in Austria, but in most Western European countries, not so long ago, homosexuality was criminalized. It was subject to penal sanction. So in many Western European countries, like France, like Germany, even in mid-20th century, people were jailed for homosexual acts. So it's not very far into, we don't have to dig very deep into the history in order to find examples like that. There were people jailed for homosexuality in Western Europe even in 1980s, still serving sentences. So from today's perspective, it looks just ridiculous. It looks just ridiculous, and it's almost unbelievable that a legislation like that ever existed. But still, it's true. In the case of Poland, no legislation like that ever existed. Poland was probably the only example of a European country with a long history that never criminalized, that never penalized homosexuality as an independent state. There was, of course, a period of partition when no Polish legal order existed, but right after Polish state regained its independence in 1918, Polish independent states penal code never included penal sanction for homosexual acts, and I don't even think it was seriously discussed. So there were no serious political forces ever advocating for this kind of legal solution. Therefore, Poland is an exception. It has been an exception of tolerance for years, for centuries. It has been an exception in terms of being a country guaranteeing freedom and equality, civil freedoms and human rights. Long time before many Western European countries ever, let's say, dared to discuss certain concepts in public. It was probably the only European country to fully guarantee religious freedom for centuries. Still, right now, this is still the case. Poland is a country in which certain political concepts are obvious, are part of our political and constitutional identity. State ruled by the law, citizens' rights are not a matter of fairly recent history, but are part of Polish heritage for a long, and they have been part of Polish heritage for years, for centuries. And at the same time, many people in Poland treat certain political propositions regarding the redefinition of marriage not as part of a rights agenda, but rather as a part of religious agenda. And when we speak about privileges, then we have to balance arguments on different sides, whether granting certain privileges to new social institutions is justified, is substantiated or not, whether reconstructing Polish labor law is substantiated or no, whether introducing certain forms of permissive sexual education, I mean type B or type C sexual education to schools is really a good idea, which is fact-based, which is research-based or no, or not. So right now we are dealing with a present political agenda, which has not much to do with human dignity, with equal enjoyment of human rights, but we are dealing with fairly new political and legal concepts, which are being discussed. And as we know, they have been subject to discussion in many countries of Western Europe, in many countries of Central and and Eastern Europe with varying results. But still, what's important is to separate something that is obvious and something that has been obvious in Poland, probably to larger extent, more extensively than in many other countries. So human dignity and human rights from political agenda, from legal agenda, that is being advocated mostly by left-wing groups and left-wing parties today. And if we separate those both, that is equal dignity, equal rights, and discussion and the discussion regarding the structure of family, the structure of education and schools, this structure, the idea of quotas in workplace, then we just situate this discussion, then we frame this discussion properly.
Could you walk us through the points of the Charter of Family Rights? Because I found the German version, I can share it later. It's very interesting. I think this could be a model for Austrian municipalities as well.
Yes, the Charter of Family Rights is a positive idea. To a certain extent, of course, it stands in opposition to attempts to ideologize school, to ideologize other fields of our life. But still, in first place, it comes up with affirmation of very basic principles which we find in Polish constitution, but I think most of them you will find in Austrian constitutions as well, and it would probably be the case of the constitutions of most European states. The Charter is about applying those general principles in daily lives of municipalities, in daily lives of local governments in our country. It starts with the parental rights, since there is a guarantee of right of parents to raise their children according to their own beliefs. Of course, like every other constitutional right, this one is also limited in its scope, but still it's there. It's Article 48 of Polish Constitution. What we say, what we want to guarantee is a full enjoyment of this right in children education and public schools. We just repeat that every extracurricular activity, so every kind of classes, any kind of classes that are that is organized outside of the obligatory curriculum needs special permission of parents. So parents just should be well informed about what's happening in schools. They should stay in touch with headmasters, with teachers, and they should be treated as part of school community. In Polish legal system, we have two different but interrelated concepts. One is education. So just providing knowledge, just providing information to kids and teenagers. At the same time, we have upbringing, rearing of children. It's about creating attitude. It's about forming attitudes of young people. So we have those two different concepts which are closely correlated. One is about just providing information. The other about creating attitudes. And in the first case, the school in Polish legal system is the entity which will be responsible. In the second case, it's up to parents. It's quite obvious that both should work with each other. Therefore, it's obvious that parents should be treated not as something outside, as a group of people being somewhere outside of the school community, but should be treated as just as a part of it, and therefore they should be up to date with all the activities taking place in school educational activities. They should also be asked for permission if something.
Parents entrust their children to the school and not the other way around, which gets confused. Who's in charge of upbringing the children, the state or the parents? I think that is a cultural battle we are witnessing here.
That's the cultural battle, and of course we shouldn't put it parents and school in any kind of strict opposition like those. We have quite good and quite well established home schooling regulations in our country, but still more than 99% of kids are being regulated, being educated by schools, and it's part of our culture, it's part of our civilization. So Family Rights Charter is about framing relations between parents and school in a best possible way, treating parents as serious members of certain community, and not just people intrusive outsiders, I would say. So it's just first part of the charter, and we propose very concrete, very precise solutions, like workshops being organized for both teachers on one hand and parents on the other, in order to develop skills, cooperation skills on both sides. So it's very important, and I think actually what we affirm, what we stand for, is just parental rights, best interest of a child. We don't expect school to advocate for any kind of particular political or even religious agenda. We just say that rights of parents, that family rights should be respected, and that's all. And that's the first
what
point.
I found very interesting. Yeah, I know. What was very interesting to me was the point about the family mainstreaming. You know, because we are hear all the time gender mainstreaming, but Polish municipalities endorse family mainstreaming. If you could explain what that means.
Yes, family mainstreaming is just a positive counter proposition to gender mainstreaming, and its basic precept is that all legal acts that are being designed, that are being drafted by local government, should be subject to family mainstreaming procedure. That means all drafted provisions should be evaluated in respect of how they are going to affect families, how they are going to affect stability of marriage, how they are going to influence large families, how they are going to influence parental rights. It's just an idea to check what will be the effect of particular legal regulation in terms of the family situation, how the regulations are going to impact situation of families in a particular municipality.
So I must admit, I will run. We have elections in the city of Vienna in October, and I will run for office, and I will steal this idea. I will steal the idea of family mainstreaming. I think Poland won't mind, the Polish municipalities won't mind, that I will advocate for something similar in Vienna, but in whole of Austria. I think it's a great idea. We have a question here on Facebook. I will read it to you. Legal rights and the European legislation seem to be clearly defined. But lately, European values are quoted in many discussions more and more often. What is the meaning of those values? Who defines what they are? And on what basis can and should they be enforced on national legislation?
Thank you for this question. So we'll get back to the Charter in a minute, since I would like just briefly, I will actually just briefly describe the other provisions, the other ideas, but answering the question. I think it's a very basic problem of the European Union today. Lack of proper definition of what European values actually are. As we all know, the Christian or Judeo-Christian heritage has been the basis of European integration, has been the basis of European culture for many centuries. It has been something quite obvious even during the period of French Revolution, even the 19th and 20th century, that Christian heritage has been some kind of reference point for all political currents. But right now, this has been abandoned. We know that that during the discussion over the European Constitution, this idea to openly cite, to openly quote, to include Christian values in the draft document was firmly rejected. Therefore, we can be sure that present European Union doesn't refer to Christian heritage, to Christian identity. Of course, there are other sources of European identity, like the modern idea of the state ruled by the law, which was developed in 18th century, 19th century, is certainly part of it. But still, it's just part. It's just a little part of European heritage. It's just little part of our common understanding of who we are. And if we look at the 1950s founding fathers of the European Union, I'm sure that they will refer to both Christian heritage at this point to some kind of procedural democracy, and at the other side. But at the same time, I think what was quite obvious then in 1950s when the European Union was starting was that our nations, our different legal and historical identities of all our nations is also part of European heritage. So we cannot be Poles, we cannot be Europeans we cannot be Europeans by simply being Europeans, by having some simplistic identity. We can be Europeans just through our Polish, Austrian, Czech, German, and French identities. And right now, if we speak about, if European Commission speaks about some kind of general European identity, I think it's very often separated from our national identities, and it very often ignores what's valued. That's differences between particular European nations. So it's very difficult to speak about European identity without referring to our particular national identities, without referring to our whole Christian heritage, and just by referring to some kind of general procedural standards, and ignoring that we are to a certain extent different. We have different history. We have different constitutive values. That's the problem of European values. That's a problem with the term, that actually some people are trying to create a new understanding of this term, but it doesn't have any firm basis. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm. I understand. So maybe you want to continue with the further points of the Charter.
Yes, I'll be happy to continue. But of course, this topic is closely related to the Charter, since I think this new understanding of European values has, unfortunately, no place for family values, has no place for our heritage, since there's nothing about exclusion in affirming our heritage. There is nothing about exclusion in affirming what's positive in family, what's positive in marriage. There is this new idea of European values, which brings no place for all what we are speaking right now. And of course, there's no basis for this idea in treaties. There is no basis for this idea in our history. And I'm afraid, without referring to our heritage, to our past, without putting emphasis on family and marriage, there is no common European future. That's the problem, and that's why that's the actual reason for this fake news. Since the case is very easy. You can find, I think that you found this charter in something like probably 1 or 2 minutes online. Yes. And probably Mrs. Daly, I don't know about her internet skills, but it wouldn't take much longer for her in order to Google it and find English language text of this charter. But still, she just, I don't know if she ever read this document, but if she read it, probably she wouldn't find any kind of discrimination, any negative provision in it. This fake news is just a political action with more general inspiration. This inspiration is to get rid of family. This inspiration is to get rid of our heritage. That's actually the inspiration. But we shouldn't instrumentalize European integration to our political causes, since I already know about the effect. So many people will be discouraged to European integration, and that would be the only effect.
Well, exactly, because I also would like to point out, I mean, that we have a union in Europe is essential. I mean, we need to grow together. We need to be partners in Europe. And it would be really a shame if we endanger the European project, as you called us, for a political agenda. So the idea that European Union forms the member states, although it should be the other way around, is dangerous. Is dangerous, and I think everybody who loves Europe, and I guess we both love Europe. We are both Europeans, and we love our peaceful Europe as it is today, and we must fight for this European Union, that it stays a Christian democratic project, as it was. I think you mentioned it yourself. It was a Christian democratic project by Adenauer, Gaspari, and Schuman. No, they would, if they knew what would happen in the name of European values today, they would be very surprised, I guess.
Yes, certainly. I think that the founding fathers of the EU that you just mentioned wouldn't have any problem with defining what the European values were back in 1950s. But right now, it's much more problematic, and it's a starting point for our today's discussion. But to describe just briefly the other points of the Charter, except for parental rights and except for family mainstreaming and legislation, what the Charter guarantees is putting family in the center of the municipal social policy. So support for it requires support for large families, It requires support for those entrepreneurs who manage to create a good working environment for working parents, for both fathers and mothers. That's the other provision of the Charter. And there's also an idea to establish an office of family rights ombudsman. So a special institution that stands for rights of families in every single municipality, a family rights ombudsman that can intervene on behalf of families and that can inform families about their rights. Both families and family members can enjoy a special protection from this kind of institution. And we already have family rights ombudsmans in something like 10 Polish municipalities, but almost 40 have adopted resolutions requiring this kind of institution. So I think that in 30 others, it's just coming. And of course, this charter just states that general family rights are going to be enjoyed and are going to be respected in Polish municipalities. It just cites Polish constitution. So it starts with something like preamble, quoting word by word the wording of Polish constitution, which includes this provision about parental rights, provision about special support for family, but also special support for marriage, which is a stable union of a man and a woman. That's exactly the definition that is included in Polish constitution, and it has been quoted in the Charter. That's maybe a part that could be found controversial by some political activists. And of course, I can understand that there are some people who may disagree, who want to advocate for redefinition of marriage. We know that in many European countries, in different way, the other definition of marriage has been adopted. But still, the Charter just quotes what's the part of Polish constitution, and there are no consequences of this quotation. It's just part of our legal system. At this point, it enjoys full support of most citizens of our country. I don't think it's any kind of hate to advocate for this definition of marriage as part of our rule of law. So if someone stands for the rule of law in Poland, and at this point, it means they should stand for this kind of legal definition of marriage, and that's all.
I believe it's worth mentioning that the European Human Rights Convention protects marriage only between a man and a wife. And also by the decisions, they always stated that there is no right to same-sex marriage. It is not a discrimination if a country does not provide marriage for same-sex couples. So obviously one can have different opinions about it, but it's not homophobia. Otherwise the European Human Rights Convention and the court would be homophobic. It is just not. It is just an idea of a family and of protection of family where we have different opinions.
Yes, certainly. What you just said appeared, this passage regarding the identity of marriage appeared in a number of decisions issued by European Court of Human Rights. I myself, I'm sometimes critical about the case law of this court, since sometimes I have a feeling that the court goes beyond the scope of application of law, which is meant to be its aim, but into the field of judicial activism. We know that the European Court of Human Rights has developed this concept of the convention as the living instrument. Therefore, in the field of transgender rights, transgender issues, it has been very active in terms of civil unions. It has been very active. We all probably know about the very well-known Schalk versus Kopp decision regarding the civil unions in Austria. We know that this court has very often applied law in a way that could be described as controversial, but still, it still affirms that the definition of marriage has nothing to do with human rights. That it has nothing to do with the convention, and it's very important.
Before we come to an end of our discussion, I want to talk about something which I thought called neo-Marxist. I usually use the term cultural Marxism. Could you explain this? What is the meaning? What is Marxist about what's happening now? Because if we think about Marxism, we are in the 80s or 20th century. It's long gone. What is the idea behind this, so we can see the danger?
Oh, thank you for this question. More like very intellectual. I think just to briefly answer to this point, I have to refer to very important, but at the same time forgotten piece published by Friedrich Engels, so the co-author of the Communist Manifesto. Engels, sometime in 1880s, published a book titled "On the Origins of Family, the State, and the Private Property." So he was originally the author of Communist Manifesto, but the protagonist of neo-Marxism as well. Since in this book, he not only refers to the private property as the artificial social construct that should be eliminated, that we should get rid of in order to create, to say it in simple words, a new paradise on earth, and in order to eradicate social problems, but he refers to family and marriage in the same way. Friedrich Engels, already in 1880s, claims that just like private property is a social, artificial social institution, just means of oppression, he also claims that family and marriage, of monogamous marriage in particular, are means of oppression. And once we get rid of it, we'll live in a better society without limitations, without many problems that we deal with. Then if we look at 20th century philosophers like those of followers of Engels and Marx from Frankfurt School, some neo-Marxist, but on the other hand, if we look at Austrian-born philosopher and psychologist Sigmund Freud, who authored this famous book, Culture as a source of suffering, then we'll see that entire classical European culture and all our social institutions, starting with family and marriage, are just being positioned as something accidental, as something which is means of oppression, as a source of suffering, as a source of problems that we read of, that we have to deal with. So just once we liberate from this culture, from those social institutions, then we can live in a better society. And then once this original Marxist project fails, this project that was primarily based on a position against private property, I think the collapse of the Soviet Union and collapse of the communist regimes in Eastern Europe is a symbolic making point in this respect. The neo-Marxist that puts emphasis on not on the private property that is more or less accepted, but on the other social institutions, on family, marriage, to certain extent the whole identity of sex, the biological differences between men and women. It's put in the first place, and right now it's the new social experiment that we are currently facing. Social experiment that has its very obvious basis in the works of Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx, later developed by Frankfurter School, but also by many postmodern philosophers. It's quite easy to use the term neo-Marxism since of course it's imprecise, but we have to use general terms in order to encompass more general, broader phenomena. And right now we have gone already quite far in terms of this experiment. Unfortunately, many politicians try to make the European Union and other international institutions as tools of this ideological experiment, but in order to save our identity, in order to save our way of living, and in order to save our European project as well, we just have to stand against it right now.
Timotheus, thank you. I believe you and Ordo Iuris, you are standing against this and for European identity, for real European identity, for Polish identity, and also for our Judeo-Christian heritage. We try to do the same here with the platform Christdemokratie, and I myself and many of my colleagues, and I'm very thankful to you that you joined our conversation this evening. I hope that also my Austrian friends here learned something, because I think we can, first of all, we can learn something from Poland if it comes to, you know, family rights and about upholding their own heritage in the side of an oppressor. Poland has some experience with that. And I also think that we can also learn that we must fight for our European institutions, because it would be really a shame we never should give that up easily, and we should get it back, I believe. So we really fight for European integration. Timotheus, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this evening, and goodbye to all. Bye.